pleasure to meet y'all at last, and welcome back to films I should have talked about years ago. So now, let me tell you, we're about to hit quite a big paradigm shift when it comes to American cinema in late 2019. Because this one right here, it's just unbelievable. Such a big accomplishment had come around late November 2019 with the film called Knives Out. I tell ya, it's the classic whodunit sort of vibe that basically comes together and reinvents it for a whole new generation. And it does spectacular at it. This film is just amazing by any means. So amazing that I just cannot really grasp myself to not similarly, well, not talk about something like this. So you know what? I feel like that the timing right here is just right for me to finally get around to it, and more importantly, to finally get a big point of view explained on this thing. Simply put, this one is certainly one of the best I might have ever had the chance to talk about. It certainly is one of the best that had come around in late 2019, and it was certainly an unlikely success. Kind of like with most films nowadays, they can usually become successful only if they're done right. Unlikely successes, though, they're a bit hard to come by. But this one really does have tons of stuff going for it. It stars the likes of tons of different highly acclaimed actors out there, from Daniel Craig and Chris Evans, to Jamie Lee Curtis, Frank Oz, Edie Patterson, and many more. I tell you, the cast alone is well moralized in a film like this. But what about the plot? Well, you know what? It's as simple as that. It's a classic whodunit scheme. Someone ends up dying at home, and this person is being examined by different detectives. Most importantly, Daniel Craig's own character in the film. And this sort of detective may not be like most Sherlock Holmes or even Turner from Turner and Hooch, which I've already talked a bit about, so be sure to check out that episode if you can. But in terms of Knives Out, this one happens to really familiarize itself with the usage of a knife as a killing weapon. Because as it turns out, each of the different people who also live inside of that large house actually get interviewed in a large room where there just so happens to be a bunch of knives around. So you know what? I feel like that right there is just the irony of it, and yet it's the beauty of it. The usage of a room full of knives, which was heavily marketed as a way of producing trailers for the film itself during its theatrical release, it really does bring out a whole lot of things worth questioning about. Like, who is the killer? What kind of knife on that wall has been taken to use as the murder weapon? All that good stuff. So it does seem like that this film really is willing to do whatever it can to answer people's questions, while also giving us a big load of entertainment when we least expect it. If there's one true significance to Knives Out, though, it would probably have to be the twists. And man, have those guys actually invented some twists out there. Because they are unbelievably well put together. I guess the best one, though, is where Daniel Craig makes a complete, total recap of what had happened already. And then eventually comes to the conclusion that, well, apparently it had not gone out like it was originally described by the others. Everybody who had been interviewed inside the house already eventually ends up getting the news about Christopher Plummer's death. And what happens, well, is that Ana de Armas actually goes and claims the house and a lot of other things. Apparently, Plummer's death was very significant. So Armand ends up getting the house instead of any of the others who actually live there. And then, as Armand's character is actually just a caretaker, pretty much. But yet, of all the people that were in the house, I tell you, that was incredible. Seeing one person actually claim onto the house, plus many other things, it's just exhilarating. I mean, that right there is quite a twist. Because, well, you can think of it sort of like a lottery game. Sometimes you win, sometimes you lose. But in this instance, you have Christopher Plummer's death being held by Frank Oz. And with that being shown, it really has a lot of color to it. A great way to basically end on a satisfying note based on that portion of this film. But the biggest twist of all, though, is where Daniel Craig's extreme level of explanation in terms of how this murder actually took place was actually a lot different than what it was supposedly originally described as. But in the end, it all comes down to a matter of a few other things. Chris Evans, of course, ends up having a private meeting with Anna, and then of course, you'd see Evans going ahead near a burning building. Man, I tell you, it gets crazier by the minute. But the real big thing about this is the ending. How it would eventually be figured out that Chris Evans was actually the one behind the death of another person in the house. So, unbelievably, this is actually how Chris Evans' character, who is known as Ransom Drysdale, ends up getting caught and being the killer. So of course, we recognize the famous shot where a knife is grabbed from the wall nearby and then is used to supposedly stab Ana de Armas' heart, but of which it fails. And then of course, Evans gets swooped in, placed under arrest, put inside of a cruiser, and all is well. The film itself ends on a high note with a song by the Rolling Stones and Ana de Armas drinking out of one of the old mugs inside the kitchen. Man, that is incredible, to say the least. To know that there is something like this nowadays, I tell you, anyone who's just getting into these kind of films really needs to look at how Knives Out can compare to others. Because it's just that great. There's not a single hint in the world that should ever succumb to many other faults that would normally come into play here. Because this film does whatever it can to stop any of these things from possibly going wrong. And as a result of that, I will say, it's an amazing recommendation that just needs to be seen to be believed. By all means. If I'm going to give this thing a score, well, here we go. The score on this one, 8.6 out of 10. So, again, it's quite a masterpiece in its own right. It does rank a bit lower though because of some things that come around, but eventually it gets through to you based on its entertainment value, its comedic dark humor, and rather sinister tone that comes into play. It's naturally like that with the sort of dark comic-like vibe that can happen in most other films. And we will continue to have such a tradition like this by any means. It's also worth to note that there actually is going to be a sequel to this. It's more of a planned thing than something that may be in production by now, but chances are a Knives Out Part 2 is possible by now. According to the producers themselves, they are wanting to create a sequel for this, just to see if it can be better. But who knows how it's going to perform compared to this one, because this one is just so incredible. Well, I guess we'll never know. Only time will tell. Just like with many other things in life. So with that in mind, that's going to be it for right now. But I will be back with some more material here. And if you want to see more, go down to my channel. Then make sure that you like, subscribe, comment, follow me on social media, and stay on the Hollywood side.